Thank you all so much for coming today, and good afternoon. I'm Cynthia Benz, and I serve as the Senior Vice President of Public Policy at the Personalized Medicine Coalition, and I'm going to be moderating the panel today. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Personalized Medicine Coalition, we are made up of more than 200 members from across the healthcare spectrum. We have patients and patient advocacy organizations, research and clinical care institutions, large and small diagnostic companies, large and small biopharma companies, and other strategic partners. And we all work together for one common goal, and that's to accelerate a paradigm shift to personalized medicine. And for those who aren't familiar with personalized medicine, we define it as a evolving field where physicians use diagnostic tests to identify biological markers to guide treatment or to use interventions that help to alter molecular mechanisms of disease. And we really feel that this is the way of the future, and that it holds great potential for reducing trial and error medicine, which we've all just now become accustomed to in our healthcare system. But we believe there's a better way by focusing on diagnostics, the data that we receive from it, and using that information along with the person's medical history and their values and preferences to guide what they want in their care. The bipartisan, bicameral Congressional Caucus for Personalized Medicine have members that seek to ensure that personalized medicine is driving healthcare decision-making, and it was launched in early 2020, so this is the fourth year of the caucus. The caucus has partnered with PMC and many of our allies to host educational briefings like the one that you're going to hear today. And we really feel that these briefings are foundational in helping to understand how personalized medicine can help improve care for patients in the healthcare system. And we appreciate the caucus's interest in holding this briefing today, and also the House Congressional Kidney Caucus for joining as a co-host. There was a book recently published by Dr. Paul Kimmel, who is from the National Institute for Diabetes, Digestive, and Kidney Diseases, and it's titled The Body's Keeper. The book describes kidneys as extraordinary organs that are regulators of the body's equilibrium. They're really important. They purify toxins from our system that are from our diets, our climate, activity, and even from injury. And just caution that there are chips and many other not friendly items in your lunchbox today. But for many of us who have healthy kidneys, we don't even think about it. We very rarely even give consideration to the fact that we have these extraordinary organs in our body. But when kidneys don't work, people die without intervention. And that's something that I think goes largely unrecognized. There are as many as 37 million people in the United States that have chronic kidney disease. And nearly 1 million of those people are at the end stage and are requiring dialysis or transplant. And it was just 70 years ago when interventions became available for people with kidney disease. And I think just knowing that history is something that will make you, I hope, think that what you're going to hear about personalized medicine and kidney pretty extraordinary, that things have come as long as they have in just a short period of time. And I really do hope that it inspires you to do something more in your day-to-day life up here, working on Capitol Hill to help reduce the individual burden of kidney disease. It impacts a huge swath of our population and many people that we don't even realize. So today's briefing, Personalized Medicine and Kidney Care, features a distinguished group of experts from research and patient advocacy communities and also from diagnostic industry. They're going to share their perspectives on kidney disease and treatment in the United States. And they're also going to provide their thoughts on how innovations in personalized medicine are starting to move the needle on improving treatment and care for those with kidney disease. So joining us today are Richard Knight, a kidney transplant recipient and immediate past president of the American Association of Kidney Patients, Dr. Jonathan Himmelfarb, professor of medicine and adjunct professor of bioengineering and pharmaceutics, founding director of the Kidney Research Institute, and co-director of the Center for Dialysis Innovations at the University of Washington. I don't actually think we were able to fit it all on his 10 card. And Dr. Elizabeth O'Day, founder and chief executive officer of Alaris. So welcome to you all, and thank you so much for being here today. So I'm going to start off the panel with a few questions, and then at the end we'll have about 5 minutes for questions from all of you. So I'm going to start with Richard, and then we'll go down the line to Dr. Himmelfarb and Dr. O'Day. Would each of you please just take a moment to introduce yourself, because you'll do a better job than I will, Give a little background on your organization and also what the state of diagnosis and treatment for individuals with kidney disease looks like from your perspective. Richard.
Thanks, Cynthia. And good afternoon, everyone. Glad that you could join us. And I want to thank leadership for PMC for hosting this. I serve on their board and very excited to be able to do that. Also, she said I'm the past president of the American Association of Kidney Patients, which was founded by patients in 1969. And the difference between us is that we're a patient-led organization. All of our leadership are patients. So this is near and dear to my heart. And I have been with the Kidney Precision Medicine Project since the inception and even before it was started. So I feel a great sense of pride and a commitment to those 37 million patients that Cynthia made reference to. Myself, I'm approaching 18 years on a kidney transplant. And what we're talking about today is near and dear to my heart because back in 2004, as I was working at my office, I got a call and was told to go to the emergency room. Your kidney's not working. And I crashed into dialysis as 32% of the patients on dialysis crash in there. And that's significant. And I'll say this, the thing about this disease and what we're talking about today, there's no conflict here. We don't care who you are, what party, what age, what sex, this disease will take its toll on you. And part of our discussion is what can we do to prevent and avoid? And that's why I do what I do. I hate to see people have to go through. And I do want to add that this disproportionately affects minorities, African Americans, 13% of the population, 32% of the patients on dialysis. That's a stark number. And the unfortunate thing is that much of it can be prevented. I do want to emphasize that, again, back to our organization, American Association of Kidney Patients. We represent kidney patients, care partners, and other family members. We're the oldest and largest independent patient-led organization in the United States and in the world. And we spend our time advocating for access to increased therapeutics, diagnostics, and we spend a lot of time advocating, trying to do what we can to push the envelope forward. And our main role and purpose is that of education, and it's a big job. Most of those 37 million people that have chronic kidney disease are not aware of it. And your kidneys can function for a long time before they just totally shut down. And that's why I was excited about what they're doing with the Kidney Precision Medicine Project. And precision medicine, personalized medicine, we describe it in a lot of different ways, but some of the things that Dr. Hemophob is going to share with you are just simply amazing. And a lot of times people come up and we talk about the need for certain additional funding, and it's just give us the money, we'll spend it. But we're doing some very incredible things through the Kidney Precision Medicine Project. And I happen to be the co-chair of the Community Engagement Committee. And I'm going to give a plug to Dr. Hemophob for the way that it's managed. Normally, patients are not as engaged in an effort as we are. Patients are involved in every step of it. And that's part of it. And let me be clear, all of us are patients at one point in time, or you have relatives, could be your parents, brothers, sisters. And the cool thing about what we're doing is we are really, the future's based on decisions that you make today. And I think that with your help, we can certainly leverage the resources that we have to make the quality of life for patients much better for all. I'm a business guy. I teach out of the business school right up the street at Bowie State University. And I look at things from that perspective right there. Cost, always very important to me. And in a past lifetime, I used to be a legislative director up here, about 30-something years ago. But I still remember that you guys have a lot of information coming your way, and you have to absorb it all. You have to represent and make recommendations and suggestions to your bosses. I understand that. And so we want to do what we can today to educate you and give you some additional information about the importance of what we're doing here and how you can help. So I'll give it back to Cynthia and let my colleagues talk.
Dr. Himmelfarb, please.
Well, first off, thanks, Richard, for so eloquently describing the need for what we're doing and how important it is to so many different people living in the U.S. and worldwide. So, as Richard said, there are about 37 million people in the United States with what's called chronic kidney disease, which means you've lost at least half of your kidney function. It's pretty serious to have chronic kidney disease. And about 850 million people worldwide, so it's between 12 to 14% of the population around the world. In addition, there's something called acute kidney injury that happens usually after an illness, and about 11% of hospitalized patients develop acute kidney injury where you have a sudden loss of kidney function, not a gradual loss as you do with chronic kidney disease. And in the intensive care unit, about 40% of patients in the ICU will develop acute kidney injury. And acute kidney injury also causes an increased risk for mortality, for dying, for ending up with chronic kidney disease as well, or for kidney disease to progress. So it's also a very serious problem. The question you asked was about where are we with diagnostics and where are we with therapies. And we have very good diagnostic tools for kidney diseases, overall blood tests and urine tests. One of the problems, as Richard mentioned, is that often for many people, kidney disease can be asymptomatic, no symptoms associated with it until it's pretty advanced. So many people aren't tested for kidney disease, so they're unaware that they have kidney disease. And there's a national study called NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, that studies the U.S. population, and up to 90% of people with kidney disease are unaware of having kidney disease. So that's a big problem because you can't treat it if you don't know that you have it. So that's one problem. But we do have good tools for diagnosing, very simple blood tests, very simple urine tests to diagnose kidney disease. Where we fall down is in having treatments that are highly effective for the majority of people who have kidney disease. Overall. And that's probably, at least in part, because there's so many different causes of kidney disease, what we call a heterogeneous population. Everybody is not the same who has chronic kidney disease. You may have it because you had diabetes or high blood pressure. It's associated with aging. There can be genetic causes. There can be environmental exposure. So there are so many different ways that you can impact how the kidney functions, that treating each of those different mechanisms, we don't have evolved good ways to know who has what that's causing their kidney disease to progress. We do have some new promising drugs, which is very exciting for our field. They're especially effective for people with diabetic kidney disease. Now there are ads all over TV for these drugs. They're the so-called Flozin drugs or SGLT2 inhibitors. And they seriously benefit about 1 in every 3 people that are treated, let's say, that have diabetes and kidney disease. But 2 out of every 3 people that are treated do not benefit, and we don't have good alternative treatments. So we often don't know how best to treat people with chronic kidney disease from a population basis or from an individual basis. For acute kidney injury, there are about 100,000 papers in the medical literature that have been published. And we don't have a single treatment that has been proven to be safe and effective. So it is a huge unmet need also because the causes are so different. Somebody may get acute kidney injury because they just had cardiac surgery, or because they have sepsis, or they had COVID, or some, a viral infection, or they got exposed to a medication, or they had a heart attack. There are just so many different causes And we don't really know what's going on in a detailed way from a molecular perspective in the kidney itself to know how best to treat each individual, in fact, any individual right now that has acute kidney injury. So it's a huge unsolved problem despite 50 or 60 years of work in this area by the biomedical research community. And I forgot you wanted me to reintroduce myself. You did such a nice job. I'll add two things: that in addition to being a professor of medicine and all those titles, I'm a nephrologist, a kidney doctor, and I still take care of patients, particularly in the hospital and particularly in the ICU. And then I am also the chair of the steering committee for the Kidney Precision Medicine Project that Richard mentioned.
Liz, can you please introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Alaris?
Sure thing. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Liz O'Day. I am the founder and CEO of Alaris. We are a precision diagnostic company that aims to develop tools for an earlier and better diagnosis of disease, catch it early before problems develop, to develop tools to better select and sequence therapies, figure out who's actually going to benefit from those fancy drugs and those that will not, and then also to develop tools to monitor for adverse effects. I started the company 10 years ago now as a spin-out from my PhD at Harvard, where I developed the underlying technology. We combine metabolomics with machine learning AI, and I'd say a very deep respect for biology and molecular pathways, so that we can try to figure out what's going on inside of a person and hopefully truly transform how diseases are diagnosed and treated. And while technically the start date of Alaris was 10 years ago, its origins go back much further than that. When I was in kindergarten, my older brother Rob was diagnosed with a rare form of adrenal cancer called neuroblastoma, and we weren't sure what was going to happen to Rob. I'll fast forward and say that he survived and thrived, and like long distance runner, crazy, does all these amazing sort of things. But it was a really scary moment in my childhood growing up. And for 2 years, we lived in Boston Children's Hospital. And I would just beg the doctors to please fix my brother. And I was very frustrated even as like a 5-year-old, that all I was told I could do was hope and pray that the medicine worked. And, good Lord, I did. But I have a very distinct memory of my older brother, pale, bald, skeleton-like, but somehow still smiling. And I just thought, okay, if Rob survives, I vow to dedicate my life, to try to develop tools to improve medicine and kind of remove some of the guesswork that went through my brother's treatment. And I can honestly say that every day since then, I've been working to hold up my end of the deal. As a scientist, I've certainly spent more hours of my life than not under a microscope or on a spectrometer. As an entrepreneur, trying to develop innovative technologies. As an adjunct faculty member at Boston College, trying to teach and empower the next generation of scientist entrepreneurs. And as an advocate, working as the co-chair for the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Biotechnology, and through my role as a board member on the PMC with all these amazing people, where we get the chance to work with government leaders like yourselves to help teach and think about ways that we can make precision medicine and improved health a reality. Because health, I think, is really the common denominator. When you have a sick child or a sick brother or a sick loved one, that's the only thing that matters in the world, is how to get them better. And what I hope everyone here today leaves the room is feeling hopeful, but also knowing that hope, and behind that hope is this incredible bedrock now of rigorous science, where we have all these amazing tools, and they are really helping us transition from the trial and error medicine that Cynthia alluded to something that I think can improve how we treat all disease, especially kidney disease. So I think we all have been throwing around the same stats, so hopefully everybody will burn in their brain. 37 million people in the US have chronic kidney disease. That is a wild number, and 90% of them don't know they have that. That's bananas. And what I want everyone to know is that we can do better. And through projects like the KPMP, we're kicking off a project at my company looking at people who could be at risk for this. We're hoping to identify biomarkers that could help just give people a little bit more of a heads up so that you had more opportunity to intervene. And we're already sort of seeing headway in this space. Genetic risk factors have been identified. I've even seen super cool technology using simple health records and finding AI patterns that can suggest this person might be on the path to this as someone you might want to screen and look at further. So there's a lot of cool technology in that space. More room to go, especially as Jonathan said, there's not a lot of good therapies. So if you are unfortunate to crash into dialysis, like Richard's story, if you progress to end-stage renal disease, there's not a lot of good options there. You end on dialysis, which is not the end game that you want. It has incredibly low quality of life, huge economic cost. I think it's 7% of the entire Medicare budget goes to dialysis, and the 5-year survival rate is left at less than 50%, right? So there's a lot of room for improvement there. The preferred option is always to get a kidney transplant, and we work a lot in kidney transplant. This is a life-saving option. It has a far better survival rate, about 80% for 5 years. However, there's an acute shortage of donors, right? When the need continues to rise at about roughly 8% every year. And for the people that are fortunate enough to get a donor, a kidney donor, they have to take these drugs called immunosuppressants for their entire lives. And with these drugs come a whole other slew of complications that put them at risk for infections, malignancy, and more. But there's good news in the transplant space. I would say we're making a ton of progress. And again, I want people to leave the room feeling bullish, because there's wild new improvements to expand the donor pool, from new algorithms to match donors and recipients sort of better. There's a lot of new technology in the actual transplantation process now. So now when an organ is donated, typically they're put in these perfusion boxes, kind of like hook them up to a box and make sure that they work before you put them in a recipient. And this has been a game changer in the ability for donors to reach, remote areas and to sort of get donations out across the globe, but certainly across sort of the US. And what's been super exciting in some of the work that we're doing as well is that now the idea is, well, when these organs are inside these boxes, can we make them better, right? Is there room for like rehabilitation? And we have a paper that's about to come out that suggests that through metabolite supplementation, you might be able to do that. Ours is for heart, but it would translate to kidney as well. So there's a lot of super cool activity that I think is sort of about to sort of, hit the main stage. And in post-transplant monitoring, that's where I think there's been a lot of activity. And biopsy, used to be the only thing that you could ever do to see if your transplant was functioning. And while it remains the gold standard, there's a whole new arsenal of tools that are available. Coupling biopsy with genetic sequencing, cell-free DNA is one assay that has utility in certain areas. There are other assays that can help pick up and differentiate true graft problems and help sort of guide therapies. So there's a lot of new things that are kind of coming out right now. I would say I'm also encouraged that, finally we're starting to see additional therapeutics being developed in the immunosuppressant space. I think we've been using the same drugs for quite some time, despite these sort of side effects. So I was just at a meeting called the Cutting Edge of Transplant a few weeks ago, and there was physicians, patients, advocates. It was just this amazing group. And what was amazing is that the pulse and the excitement in the room was palpable, because these technologies are here. It's not if anymore, it's when. And I really look forward to talking to you guys in your offices more about how we can sort of accelerate those timelines. So, thank you.
I'm going to go to Dr. Himmelfarb, because one of the things that we wanted to highlight is some of the progress that we've had in the Kidney Precision Medicine Project. So if you can tell us a little bit more, I know there's some overarching goals for the project, what those goals are and sort of where you are in meeting those, because I think it's been a while since the project kicked off. And then I'd like to go to Richard after that to talk about his experience as a patient.
So we are in year 7 of the Kidney Precision Medicine Project, and it was conceived about a decade ago. It takes a few years. This is an NIH-funded project. It really is a truly visionary project. And I also want to reiterate that this is a super exciting time in the kidney field, because we are seeing new treatments for diabetic kidney disease, new treatments for certain kinds, it's called IgA nephropathy. There are now 17 companies that are working on new drugs, and 3 of them have just had papers come out that show that the drugs really, truly work. So we have discovered a genetic cause. Richard mentioned this disproportionality of African Americans developing end-stage kidney disease and being on dialysis. And we have, as a community, discovered a genetic risk factor that accounts for about half of that excess risk. And there are now many companies that are working on therapies to block that risk. And there's already been a small clinical trial that shows a lot of promise. So it's a hugely exciting time for developing new therapies for kidney diseases, which is great. The big gap is that for these common conditions of what we call, they're really syndromes, a chronic kidney disease and acute kidney injury, because there are so many different causes and they manifest in so many different ways that we don't really, when somebody presents with chronic kidney disease, or in the ICU, let's say with acute kidney injury, we don't know what's driving the disease process inside the kidney. Kidney's a super complicated organ. It's as complicated as the brain. Your 2 fist-sized kidneys are amazing, really. They get 25% of the cardiac output, the blood that comes out. So 700 liters of blood a day flows through your kidneys. They make a 140-liter filtrate through this intricate structure in the kidneys, and then 99% of that is reabsorbed back into the circulation. But all the waste products are excreted, and it maintains the kidneys maintain the blood in a constant state. They do that by being incredible sensors of the body and by having 60 or 70 different cell types in the kidney. The complexity has made it difficult to develop individualized therapies or personalized therapies. The NIH, what's called the NIDDK, the kidney part of the NIH, recognized this and launched the Kidney Precision Medicine Project. And the idea was to fill in that missing gap, to understand the structurally and from a molecular perspective, what are the drivers in different individuals of the disease process in the kidneys themselves. And the only way to do that was to get biopsy samples from people with these conditions. What's amazing about the Kidney Precision Medicine Project is that we ask altruistic people with chronic kidney disease or acute kidney injury to take on the medical risks of a kidney biopsy, not because they're going to benefit individually, but because the knowledge gained is going to benefit other patients with this condition in the future. So this study has a strong ethical underpinning and, as Richard mentioned, very strong community and patient engagement. And we have a saying that our participants in the study are the heroes of KPMP. That's the mantra of the study. It was actually one of our kidney patients who came up with that, who's on our community engagement committee. The study has extremely strong patient engagement, and that committee is the most important committee in the entire study. It's a very ambitious study. It involves almost 300 investigators in 50 different academic medical centers throughout the United States. The study is well underway. It is a successful study already, and it's increasingly successful. One of the other real advantages of this study is that it is dedicated to open data science. So we want this information to be available to the community all around the world that is going to make a difference for people living with kidney disease. So as soon as the data is quality controlled and curated and annotated, it goes onto the KPMP website, so that we are now getting about 1,000 downloads a week from around the world of this data. So every biotech company, every pharmaceutical company that's trying to make new therapies, they're all using this data. And we're finally learning what are the molecular drivers that in chronic kidney disease and in acute kidney injury, and how do we map them to biomarkers, whether it's metabolomics, metabolites, or other biomarkers in the blood and the urine. And ideally, this will lead to new therapeutics that'll be targeted to the individual drivers and causes of the disease in individual patients, and that will make the clinical trials and the therapies more successful, and I really do think we can move the needle over time and change the public health burden. It took cardiology about 50 years to bend the risk curve. It takes a long time to do this, but they did over time, and it was through the development of a better understanding of what causes heart disease, the development of new medications, new devices, and new algorithms for treatment and new diagnostics as well. And we're behind that in the kidney space, but we're really starting to catch up now. So it's a super exciting time. The Kidney Precision Medicine Project has already delivered a huge amount of information that's out there that around the world now is being used to develop new diagnostics, new therapeutics, and the learning, the information that's becoming available will teach us really truly in the future how to give the right treatment at the right time to the right patient, which is the whole goal of precision medicine or personalized medicine. So this is a vanguard study. There has never been a study like this in the kidney space ever before. It was visionary for the NIH to conceive of this about 10 years ago, and it's on a very good track right now with new data coming in all the time. So we remain quite excited about this study.
Thank you so much. And Richard, you are not only one of the altruistic participants in the KPMP, but you're also a wonderful spokesperson for what the potential that it has. So can you talk a little bit about what you and others in the patient community hope are going to come out as results that improve care, and also, what Congress can do to help?
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. And you guys just got a dose from nose to what I go through on a regular basis. I constantly have my cell phone, and I Google things and I look them up. I teach graduate and undergraduate courses out at Bowie State University, so it's a lot of reading, a lot of staying up, but it's worth the commitment. One thing that he mentioned is the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. Let's break that down a little bit. It's not kidney disease, it's kidney diseases. And think of the young ones who may have something, either born or they develop it when they're young. Many times they're misdiagnosed because we simply don't have the ability to give the type of diagnosis that is accurate. And that is what the Kidney Precision Medicine Project is doing. And as part of that, as he talked about sharing the data, there's collaborations with private sector companies. So that's leveraging the resources that are going into a government agency for a government-funded project. And that allows us to take advantage of a much wider group of scientists, researchers, who can look at and come up with different remedies. Now, we talk a lot about dialysis, but the ugly truth is we don't talk about that on the way to dialysis. Most people die. We want to prevent that. It's something called going upstream. And if the primary care physicians and nephrologists have access to better tools, which the Kidney Precision Medicine Project will provide them, then they can be more specific in the diagnosis. We can catch it earlier. And with he mentioned the SGL2 inhibitors, it's the Jardiance commercial that you see on TV all the time, those. Well, the real question is, will the insurance companies pay for it? So those are also considerations that we have to take. So we are excited about therapeutics and new diagnostic tools. And I want to read very briefly an official statement from AAKP. And this is also one of the challenges that we're dealing with. In March 2023, during the nation's annual National Kidney Month, transplant recipients on Medicare were subjected to major new restrictions in the access to critical molecular blood tests they have depended on since 2017 for organ health and surveillance for possible early rejection indicators. These tests are highly regarded by transplant recipients and transplant professionals caring for them. Translation: we do not have access to, and that's one of the critical issues right there, is making certain that we get access to diagnostics and other therapeutics that have come out. And that's being done by Medicare. Sometimes Congress passes the laws and they get interpreted by the different agencies. And as a patient advocacy organization, many times we simply don't agree. And as patients, you know, we want to certainly make our voices be heard. That's why we come up and talk with you. We come with the doctors and we come with other folks because we want to make certain that you have the perspective from the patients. If we can identify this disease early, we can slow the progression by many years. Is it 10 or 15 years? How? I know we can slow the progression of this disease. So what does that really mean? That means that the quality of life is there for the patient. That means that the patients can pursue their lives. That means that the patients can continue working and paying taxes. And that's certainly important because, as Liz mentioned earlier, you know, the dialysis patients are a small number of the Medicare patients, but they take up such a significant portion of the budget. And I think what patients are concerned with, you know, there's patient preferences and there's metrics. The doctors are always concerned with metrics. How do you feel? How's your blood pressure, your BU and KT over V and other things that I used to go through when I was on dialysis. But we're more interested in how we feel. And much of the medications, I was laughing when Liz talked about the immunity suppressant medications because I take those. And I've been taking the same medication for 17 plus years. Now, I'm not a medical person, but I happen to believe that we can have some progress because everybody gets the same dosage. But Kidney Precision Medicine Project allows for a more specific, but that's what precision medicine is about. It allows us to be more precise in the treatment that you get. And for any medication you get, trust me, there are side effects. And somebody says, well, Richard, aren't you concerned about that? I said, if I don't have to sit on the machine 3 times a week for 4 hours a day and come away tired and the other things that go along with being dialysis, I will take the transplant option, which is the preferred modality. But now the flip side of that is that we have a shortage of kidneys. We have a shortage of donors. One of the things that we can do, and this is, I tell people, fundamental math, if we can increase the lifespan of the kidney that a person has transplanted, then they won't need to have multiple transplants. I have friends who they're on their 4th transplant. I'm fortunate. I'm still very healthy. I spent some time in the hospital with COVID and pneumonia, lost about 30 pounds. But I'm working my way back. And as I tell people, I'm very fortunate. Many people in my situation go in and they may not come out. So we need to be able to do a better job. And the project that Dr. Hemopharm is talking about is quite expansive, and it is great importance to the lives of patients. But we have to educate. We have to educate folks to understand the positive effect that it brings. So we will continue to do that, advocate, and I continue to learn so that I can be able to explain and talk. When I first joined the board of PMC, I would listen to our conversations, and they were talking pretty much about cancers. Dr. Hemopharm mentioned many years ahead of us in terms of the research. And I said, well, that sounds like what we're talking about over at KPMP. And this precision medicine is something that goes across diseases. So again, is it available? Will the insurers pay for it? Are we getting a good return on the effort? It does take time. But when you talk about the quality of life that you will have, sometimes we don't miss something, we take it for granted. You guys take it for granted. You get up, if you go to the bathroom, do whatever you have to do. When you're on dialysis, you don't pass water. That's taken care of on the dialysis machine. So if our goal is to get things upstream, have more specific diagnosis so that we can slow the progression down. What that does, because I'm a numbers guy, ultimately that's going to bring the cost of healthcare down significantly. So I'll pass it back to you, Cynthia, because I could just go on about that.
And thank you so much, Richard. And the one thing that Richard made really clear and what we're all about at PMC is how personalized medicine can improve patients' lives and help them lead as normal a life as possible. But we didn't talk about the cost of dialysis. And the cost of dialysis, just Medicare alone, it's $7 billion. So it's a staggering number that is attached to just dialysis alone, and we know that we can do better. So I'll actually ask Liz to talk a little bit about the testing that you all have developed for applications in graft to help keep those transplants healthy and help people live as normal a life as they can, and also, you know, some of the applications that you all see for testing earlier for screening purposes, if you can.
Yeah, sure, thank you. So maybe I'll just do a quick little biomarkers 101. I think biomarkers are used a lot in diagnostics, and what are they and what do they all mean? So there's biomarkers, biological markers that are in all of us that help relay some sort of information about what's going on inside of you. There's different classes, DNA and RNA, genomic-based biomarkers. These are like risk factor, right? So it tells you what could happen. There are protein biomarkers, which sort of tell you what could be making something or what could not. And then there are metabolites, or metabolite biomarkers, which is what we study and we're so excited about. So metabolites are the small molecules that swim around in you and I that provide energy and biomass for life to exist. The rate that you make and break down these molecules is what makes you, you, me, and why you could be susceptible to certain diseases, and myself others, and why if you and I get the same disease and are treated with the same drug, because of our different metabolic pathways, you could have a beautiful outcome and me not so much. So the metabolome is influenced by your genome and your environment and your microbiome, so it is often called the fingerprint of phenotype. It is the most comprehensive readout of an individual. It is incredibly challenging to measure, and that's why it hasn't really moved as quick of a pace as genomics and some of these other areas, but it is poised to deliver. Oh, I forgot to press the button. I'm so sorry. Hopefully people still heard that. It's poised sort of to deliver, I think, a lot of applications in the precision medicine space. And so, Cynthia, you asked how we're going to help transplant patients. We're going to help them know that they're okay, is the answer. And so I've been fortunate to meet a lot of transplant recipients. Richard is one, and several others. And I thought it would be helpful to see the applications by telling stories, through them. So there's this amazing patient, kidney transplant patient. Her name's Valen Kiefer. She's a patient advocate. She has a docuseries that it's on Netflix that if you want a good cry and an inspirational moment, please go watch. But she had PKD. She developed, she needed to get a kidney transplant. She's also needed to get a liver transplant in her life. And she has taken center stage of managing her health. She is so on top of things. She brings a big binder of all of her health records wherever she goes. But unfortunately, she still had a lot of complications. And she's kind of bounced from one health crisis to the next, in and out of the hospital. And the reason that happens is because the biomarkers or the diagnostics we have aren't good at early detection of a problem. So there are all these kind of lagging indicators that you're fine. Oh my God, the house is on fire, right? So metabolites are kind of like the canary in the coal mine. Our test, and it's really hard to design tests and to prove them this way, but have been all sort of set up to be positive predictive value, to be able to offer that early detection of these events so that people can go seek medical care earlier. There's another woman, her name's Cara B. She's about 34-year-old two-time kidney transplant recipient patient. She got her first transplant as a child, and then another one more recently. And for whatever reason, she's incredibly prone to infections. So these immunosuppressants that the patients have to take for their whole lives, it dampens their immune system so you don't kick out this new beautiful kidney or graft that's just been put at you. But it puts you at risk for, infection. And Cara has had just one infection after the other that has caused her to miss ton of school, a ton of like life, but she's on the lowest dose of immunosuppressants that her doctors feel comfortable with. She has described it as like they're too scared to lower the dose because they're afraid that'll risk rejection. With metabolomic assays, we're going to be able to sort of take away these just crude dosing that exists and really fine tune it for individuals. So, hopefully Kara can get the right dose for her so she can live, And then the last patient that I wanted to mention is someone she's a heart transplant patient, but the application resonates in kidney as well. Her name is Molly, and when we were talking, she coined a term that I hadn't heard before, but I think it's so important. She said, I don't want transplant cancer. So transplant patients, by virtue of taking these drugs, are at an incredibly high risk to develop cancer. The physicians we talked to have said you have to treat every transplant patient like they're on the path to cancer. They're 200 times more likely to get skin cancer. I think overall 5 to 6 more times likely to get any sort of cancer. And it's because these drugs, which do such a great job of turning your immune system on, then don't have enough kind of oomph, to keep cancer and other sort of diseases from development. And so again, like in the ability to sort of fine-tune dosing, using metabolites, we're hoping that over time that empowers physicians to not have such a heavy hand when they're, dosing these immunosuppressants, and that we could lock it down and ultimately sort of reduce the rates of some of these complications, including malignancy. There is a beautiful op-ed on the New York Times that came out that's called My Transplanted Heart and I Will Die Soon. And it's, again, about a woman who received a heart transplant from a 13-year-old girl, and she did everything right. She took a medication every single day, never touched butter, never drank alcohol, but she got diagnosed with stage 4, I think, lymphoma, and unfortunately, she and that beautifully transported heart died, right? So this is where I think diagnostics like ours and others that people are developing, can really transform the quality of life for transplant patients, which will have all these ancillary benefits that Richard was alluding to as well of, extending graft life, extending survival, and certainly reducing cost of care. Transplant patients are readmitted, 63% of them are readmitted in their first year post-transplant, and it costs Medicare $25 billion a year. That's insane. We can do better by just having a couple of better tests to be able to catch these problems.
I think we're going to move on to the issue of addressing some of the challenges with diagnostics and treatments reaching patients. We've observed over time at PMC that there are a number of challenges. Some of them are related to just generally the science to support the technologies, limiting them and their access to patients, but some of them are reimbursement and regulatory challenges with actually making their way to patients. So would be curious, just from each of your perspectives, how do we avoid some of the pitfalls we've seen in other areas of personalized medicine like cancer, which is a success story for precision medicine, but still has challenges in all these areas? How do we avoid some of those, and what would you say are the best ways to navigate it? And what could these folks do to help? Richard.
Thank you for that. Sorry, but thank you for that lead in. Well, one thing that we can do is that there's a congressional letter that's going around about pre-screening that was started by the co-chairs of the Congressional Kidney Caucus. And patients know that pre-screening for kidney disease saves lives. I'm not a medical person, so I see things through a different lens, what I call kind of like, common sense. The earlier that we identify this disease, the better we can do to help support and allow some of the therapeutics and diagnostics to be able to be effective. Now diagnostics are very important because I'm approaching 18 years out. And I go to my nephrologist and say, Doc, there's got to be something wrong. He said, Mr. Knight, your numbers say you're okay. So having access to those diagnostic tools, and the one I mentioned earlier about Medicare not supporting that, We don't exactly know why, but we're certainly pursuing it. There's been a ton of articles, Wall Street Journal, Forbes magazine, about, well, why did we stop this? 28,000, since they've done that, 28,000 fewer tests of that nature have been done. The other thing is, again, just fundamental pre-screening so that we can, if you have a problem, and the other thing is that with the diagnostics that we have now and what we're developing in KPMP, you'll be able to find out things before they happen, before they become evident. One time when I was going through a dialysis session, they put the needle in your arm and, the machine does its thing. Well, when they miss, that's problematic. And I said to the tech, take it out. You've missed. She said, oh, I don't see anything. So she had to wait until she could see it, as opposed to me being able to feel it because you're in my arm, and it just all of a sudden blew up. Well, on a much more sophisticated level, that's what many of the new therapeutics and diagnostics will do, is they will let us see things before they become problematic. And again, prevention. So what can we do? We have implemented the new payment models, and we need to monitor those and make appropriate adjustments if we can. And the payment models focus more on looking at the patient as a whole. One nephrologist said to me, well, we don't do that because we don't get reimbursed for that. So we've taken care of that. We've taken a look at that, and we're making changes. Now, what you can do to help us out is continue to educate. You're here representing your bosses, and they've got decisions to make. And we know that everybody needs additional funding. So it's a question of trade-offs. And I would certainly ask and hope that we can continue to fund NIH so that we can fund enough of the acronyms, the National Institute of Health, so that we can provide those funds to NIDDK, National Institute Diabetes, Digestive, and Kidney Diseases, so that they can continue on with the effort and the research that they're doing, because it does save lives. It enhances a patient's quality of life. And as an organization, we will continue to advocate on behalf of the doctors and the researchers. So just be receptive when we come up and talk with you. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. Again, breakthroughs are happening all the time. But my big thing is when we have all these meetings, I have on my business hat, and I'm saying, well, this is great, but can we get it paid for? So that's very important too. I'll let some of the others chime in here because, again, we could go on for that for quite a while.
And I just say, a lot of times when you look at screening's looked at as a cost, but if you just heard the two numbers that we threw out that were related to costs, $7 billion in Medicare on dialysis and $25 billion on transplant rejection. If you're moving earlier in the disease to stop people from actually developing end stage in the first place, there are, I think, some important points there. So, Dr. Himmelfarb?
So a lot of great points have been raised. To my way of thinking, precise diagnostics and precise therapeutics go hand in hand. They're synergistic, and we have to co-develop both of those at the same time. This is a totally different era in kidney diseases. We now have about 150 companies that are now working on developing new therapies for kidney diseases. There was never a time like that before. But to know how to best implement those new treatments that are coming along, you have to match them to the diagnostic testing. What we're doing in KPMP, very similar to what you're doing, Liz, is we are, in addition to mapping molecularly and structurally what's going on in the kidney, we collect all of these biosamples for biomarker measurements with metabolites and proteins and DNA and genotyping, et cetera. And ideally, in the future, we will have blood tests and urine tests that will tell us what's going on in the kidney, because we'll have mapped those to the kidney. So people wouldn't need to take the medical risk of a kidney biopsy to know what would be the right treatment, the right dose at the right time for that person. So that's the vision, that's the goal. We are moving in that direction. This whole field is moving really well. Kidney disease is, from the perspective of people in this room, a super expensive disease. So people have mentioned that dialysis costs, the cost of caring for dialysis patients is 7% of the Medicare budget. It's 1% of the entire federal budget, the entire federal budget for dialysis patients. And you can say that if people need dialysis, that was a failure of prevention and early treatment much of the time if we have safe and effective treatments. For people, the 37 million people with CKD, the average annual healthcare costs are about $22,000 compared to $7,000 for the average person, more than 3 times that cost. So kidney disease is an expensive disease. The more severe the disease, the more expensive it is to society. So yes, we need to deploy all the best diagnostics, and we need to deploy all the best therapeutics that we have, and we need to continuously improve those diagnostics and improve those therapeutics going forward. Funding the NIH does help, but it takes more than the NIH to make this work. It does take reimbursement, it takes regulation, and it takes product development on the part of industry as well. It all has to go hand in hand. If we really want to bend the curve, and we do want to bend the curve of kidney disease and make it a much less prominent disease than it is today.
Liz, would you like to have the last word? And then if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and let us know.
Sure. So I think Cynthia had asked me to maybe talk about a little bit about reimbursement and the challenges that are there. So I think we're closing up, so like maybe that's a good reason we don't have that much time to get into it. But no, there's the VALID Act, there's the new FDA proposed regulation of LDTs, there's MolDX, there's the changes to CMS coverage to the allograft monitoring. There is a lot happening right now in terms of discussions around diagnostic reimbursement. We don't have time to get into all of it, but I will just say that I'm actually really encouraged by this activity because I think it sort of is a recognition of the importance that diagnostics play. Simply put, diagnostics make medicine work. They are also like the precursor for many medicines to even get developed, right? So diagnostics play this incredibly important tool. They are probably the most important tool to be healthy, stay healthy, and to sort of get back on track. But traditionally, they haven't been, there's been a lot of uncertainty around how these sort of tools can get paid for. So unlike, let's say, therapeutics or even any other non-health related industry, if you have some innovation, you're allowed to sort of charge some premium pricing before it goes back into sort of the public domain. Diagnostics have not had that benefit over history where you really were just being reimbursed for the benchtop reagents needed to like pipette and do the test, which made the first generation of diagnostics not that great. But now we have all these amazing diagnostics that are out there, but that innovation required investment and will require more investment. And if we want these diagnostics to be even more vetted and to have the utility really locked down, we need to, at the same time as we're discussing like changes and modernizing regulatory frameworks, my ask of everyone in this room is to make sure that you include discussions around reimbursement with that as well. Because you can't ask more without also creating a way that there's going to be kind of a feeder to fuel that sort of pipeline. So as all these discussions are happening right now, I would just make sure that you marry together like coverage and reimbursement, because that's like the way that we'll really get the diagnostics to work to create the medicine that we all want.
Okay. Are there any questions from the audience? Well, if there are no questions, even my colleagues are quiet. You guys did a great job answering all the high points. So I'll just close and thank everyone for being here. My colleagues and I at the Personalized Medicine Coalition really do appreciate all the effort that you made. We know that you're dealing with FY24 appropriations, FY25 appropriations, and a number of other hearings that are going on at the same time, and probably a lot more that we don't even know of. I really want to thank our speakers for coming a great way to be here in person, and really want to also thank Senator Sinema's staff and Senator Tim Scott's staff for hosting this briefing and for helping us organize it over on the Senate side. It's really been wonderful, and really appreciate your dedication to making sure that the caucus continues to be bicameral and also really bipartisan and bringing the most important issues to all of the folks up on the Hill that need to hear it. Without you, today's program really wouldn't be possible. And also want to thank some of our friends here from Foley and Lardner, who have also been great partners in making the briefing happen. So for any of you who have bosses that aren't members of the Congressional Personalized Medicine Caucus, you had a paper on your chair when you came in. It's a bit of a overview of the caucus, but you can feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to learn more, and happy to chat more about it. We would like to continue to work with you if this is something that's of interest, and just hope you all have a great afternoon. The video will be available probably in about a week on personalizedmedicinecoalition.org. So thank you all very much, and have a great day.
And I'll give a short shout out to my personal Congresswoman Susan Del Bene, who is a co-chair of the Congressional Kidney Caucus from Seattle, along with her Republican colleague Larry Bouchon.